Hello everyone, it's good to be with you again. We're thrilled you made it back. I hope you've had a chance to start on your inventory and practice the mindfulness stuff that Phil's been teaching us. This week, we're going to finish talking about the mechanics of the inventory, and then Phil will give you the last part of the mindfulness exercises. We've got a lot to cover, so let's jump right in. Last week, we talked about the positive traits tab, and we started the resentments tab. As a quick recap, we said we're going to work these worksheets one column at a time. So first, we list out all the resentments that we can think of in column 1. Then we move on to column 2. And for each item, we write down why we resent that person, place, or thing. Once we finish column 2, we move on to column 3 and write down how that thing impacted us when it happened. Finally, column 4 is how that thing is still impacting us today. To finish out this tab, we write down in column 5 what part we played in this resentment. Now, if you were a kid, when the thing happened, you put innocent or I played no part in column 5. Because as a kid, you really didn't have a choice. Even if you did something wrong, it's most likely because of how adults were treating you. If you resent your mom because she slapped you, you put innocent or I played no part in column 5. Maybe you think, well, I did misbehave and I did deserve it. This is your chance to put that lie to rest. No kid deserves to be physically abused, ever. If you are a parent that hits their kids, I'm not judging you, but please look at the comment section for the links to articles that can explain this sensitive topic a lot better than I can. For now, just trust in the process. Innocent or I played no part if the resentment occurred when you were a kid. That's what you write. For the things that happened when you were not a kid, try to think of whether or not you play a part in the issue. For example, if you resent your job because they make you work a lot of hours, is there something you could be doing to work less? Could you actually be working a lot because it helps you escape a stressful home life? If you resent your spouse, could you be more grateful for them and see their good traits instead of always looking at their negative attributes? Take a look at it and take a look at how you might be contributing to the resentment and write that down. The next columns are for a later step, so skip those for now. Let's move on to the fears tab. The fears tab is similar to the resentments. We fill this out one column at a time, starting with listing the things we fear. Now this one can be a little tricky in that we're not listing the things that would naturally cause fear. We're not listing things like, I'm afraid of heights, or public speaking, or breaking my leg. What we're trying to get at here is the things we fear because something happened to us to make us fear them. Or we have an emotional reaction to them even though they're not going to physically harm us. Examples are things like this. I'm afraid my spouse is going to leave me. I'm afraid I'm going to get fired. I fear that my kids don't respect me. A common one is I'm afraid that I'm not good enough, that I don't measure up. Don't worry if the fear sounds irrational. List it anyway. That's actually part of what we're trying to figure out. Those things that we fear that are not really a threat. Once you've listed out all the fears you can think of, we move to column 2. This is where we write down where we think the fear originated. This might take some thought, but try to figure out what happened to you in the past that would make you have this fear. Maybe it's because your dad left. Maybe it's because he left home and you fear that other people you love are going to do the same thing. Maybe it's because no one ever told you that you're good enough. In fact, they told you that you'd never amount to anything. and now you fear failure, even though you're good enough at what you do. Maybe you have the fear because that your fear actually did happen. Sometimes a duck is just a duck. Give these things some thought and see if you can go a little deeper than the surface answer. Sometimes the fear comes from something that seems unrelated. Here's a little psychology lesson on that. I'm no psychologist, but here's a lesson. They did this study with a baby, little Albert, where a white rat would be put in front of the baby. Initially, the baby showed no fear at all and even tried to pet it. But then, every time the rat came close, someone would make a loud noise, scaring the baby. Of course, the baby stopped trying to touch the rat and got scared whenever it came close. He even got scared of other animals, even if they were stuffed. Now, this study was done a long time ago, and people like to argue about the conclusions, but there's no doubt that the things they call classical conditioning and stimulus generalization exist. You've probably heard of Pavlov's dogs, who would salivate whenever they heard a bell because they were conditioned to expect food. Stimulus generalization means that it doesn't necessarily have to be a bell or a white rat. It could be something else that sounds like a bell or looks like a rat, but it has the same effect. In simple terms, stuff that happens to us, especially as kids, can cause us to act or feel a certain way without us realizing it. So think about it as you fill out column 2. The next column is how you've dealt with the fear. This one takes some thought too, because our reaction to fear is instant and usually at a subconscious level, especially when it involves fear of pain. Some examples are, I have a fear of failure, so I don't try very hard, or I even fail on purpose, so then it was my idea, not someone else telling me I failed. I fear being left by my significant other, so I leave them at the first sign of trouble, so I'm in control. Here's a common one. I fear that if people got to know the real me, they wouldn't like me. I deal with that by acting stronger than I really am, and never admitting that I'm wrong or have weaknesses, or I lie a lot. Next, write down how that's been working for you. How's that been working for you? Maybe it's working, but you can't hold on to relationships. Did I mention that these inventories weren't easy? They may not be easy, but they will be amazing. The last column for now is how the fear is holding you back. What if the fear didn't exist and you didn't do the things that you wrote down in column 3? How would your life be different? Is the fear keeping you from doing something that you really want to do? Is it keeping you from deep relationships with people? Is it keeping you stuck in a job that you know is below your skill level? Write down anything you can think of for each fear you have listed. We'll skip those last 2 columns for now. We come back to those in step 6. Okay, last tab, behaviors. In the first column, you write down anything you've done that hurt yourself or others. Start with the things that are directly related to your addiction. I stole money to feed my habit. I neglected my kids so I could act out. I cheated on my wife. I drove while intoxicated. I ate an entire chocolate cake. I agreed to do something I really didn't want to do and felt resentful about it. Then think about those things that you feel ashamed of. I didn't show up at my sister's wedding. I lied to my friend. Someone needed help and I pretended not to notice. Don't worry about the thing being too big or too small. This is for you, and what matters is how you feel about it, not what others would think. In the next column, we list out the people that have been impacted by the things that we've done. As addicts, we like to think that our addiction only hurts ourselves, and that's denial, the absence of rigorous honesty. Drop the defenses and be real. Think about who your behavior affected and list them all. My parents, my kids, my spouse, my sister, my friend Bob, my friend Phil. When you've listed out everyone you can think of for each item, in the very last row, below the final behavior, write, all of the behaviors above impacted me. The next two columns are for how my behavior impacted the people I listed in column 2, and how the behavior impacted me. What were the short-term and long-term consequences of my actions? Did they physically or emotionally hurt the person? Did it make them think less of themselves, or that they were the problem? Did I damage their trust? Did I keep them from having a better life? And how did that impact me? Did it cause me to lose money, possessions, or my freedom? Did it cause me shame or self-loathing? The behavior sheet, it can definitely be triggering. So make sure you're taking a lot of breaks and being mindful of how you're feeling. Speaking of being mindful, let's wrap up today by having Phil talk to us about the third and final mindfulness exercise. I'll see you next week when Phil and I are going to talk about abstinence versus harm reduction. For now, here's Phil.
Thanks, Chris. This past week, you practiced doing body scans and noticing how your body feels. I encourage you to keep that practice up. You'll find that you start noticing bodily sensations more, even when you're not doing the mindfulness exercise. What's really cool about noticing what your body is doing is that sometimes it alerts you that something is going on emotionally. When an emotion is triggered, especially fear or anger, your body gets activated. I remember reading a work email once that was questioning something I had done. I noticed that my heart was beating really fast and my ears felt hot. I noticed the physical manifestation before I realized I was having an emotional reaction. What that helped me do is think about my next move. I really wanted to blast back a response to that email, but because I noticed my heart rate, I knew that I was emotionally hijacked and I would probably regret sending that email. So instead, I walked away. I let myself calm down before I responded. I'm really glad I did because my response was very different coming from a calm mind than it would have been when I was having an emotional reaction. We're going to talk a lot more about emotional regulation when we get to step 7. For now, though, your exercise this week is simply to notice your emotions. Sometimes you'll get a clue, like I did with that email, but sometimes it's just something going on inside your head. I want you to notice when you feel angry or scared or anxious. Notice it and name it. Man, I feel really angry right now. I feel a deep sadness. Then just sit with that emotion for a minute or two. Don't try to push it away. Just notice it and how it makes you feel, emotionally and physically. Emotions are going to come up while you're working on your inventory, I can promise you that. So again, just notice them and let them linger a bit. You'll find that sitting with the feeling actually helps it to pass more quickly than trying to stuff it. If it's feeling too strong or uncomfortable, take a break from your inventory and read those positive traits you wrote down on the first tab. Call a trusted friend, pet your dog, do something soothing for yourself that isn't your addiction. That's going to help you get through the inventory, and it's also going to be teaching you how to deal with your addiction. You're well on the road to recovery when you can fight through uncomfortable emotions and find an alternative to your drug of choice. Okay, back at it, my friends. Stay the course, trust the process. We'll be talking to you soon.